And a very good morning to you. You're welcome back. If you've just joined us, you missed a great Ronnie Whelan interview that Joe did on Sunday. Every Sunday, they're bringing you a big feature interview with an Irish football legend. You can check out that full Ronnie Whelan interview wherever you get your podcast. The best place for us, obviously, is on offtheball.com or on the Go Loud app. It is 8 o'clock, a minute past 8 on Thursday, the 23rd of April. Owen Sheehan, how are you?
Very well, Ger. What's the crack?
I was out and about yesterday evening doing my 2K cycle, and it was busy. It was busy. People are out and about. People are, getting back to life.
Yeah, people are certainly out and about. Everything is busier now. It seems. It seems that the trips are getting more frequent out of the house. The perhaps journeys are getting a little bit longer as we start to, I don't want to use the word complacent, but you'd struggle to find any other word for it at this moment. We're definitely a bit more relaxed about things at the moment, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, what impact does this have for sport? I suppose we're all trying to grapple with the question of what comes next, and it's all over the papers today, but it's the messaging that's coming through has been, we flattened the curve, and now it's like no restrictions are going to be lifted on the 4th or 5th of May. I'm not quite sure what the messaging is.
I think the messaging had been clear, or the strategy at least had been clear from the very start, that you make one announcement, like say, what was it, the week before Paddy's Day, about closing the schools, for example. That sends a degree of shock around the country. People are reminded of how serious the pandemic is. A couple of 1 week later, you had Varadkar's speech on St. Patrick's Day, which kind of reminded us again of how important it is that we all play our part. A couple of weeks later, then you had an instigation of basically full lockdown, and it seemed that every little step was just another kick up the hole, basically, for the country. And I think we kind of need that kick every so often. And it seems that since the announcement of a full lockdown, there hasn't been a proverbial kick up the hole since. So you can look at that one of two ways. You can look at that, say, well, that's a drop and get a ball a little bit. That if you look at the behaviour of Irish people, of course they're going to get a little bit more complacent. Or it could be a situation where they're like, we actually don't need to give another kick at this particular moment in time. And you wonder then if that is a bit more of an easing back into normality come the 6th of May. Now, what we don't want is a situation where people have the 6th of May circled in their calendar and it's like, right, freedom. This is where everything returns to normal. I can have 400 people over to the house. We can have some sort of Great Gatsby-esque return to normal life. That would be a very, very dangerous thing to do. But if you ask about the possibility of sport and how it might play, if the 6th of May represents a dipping of the toe, and I know you use that phrase a lot, but a dipping of the toe into the life of normality again. And this is just, I don't know, maybe going beyond your 2 kilometers. This is maybe like, I don't know what that is, to be quite honest with you. I don't know what the middle ground is, but there is definitely a sporting middle ground to be had there, that perhaps teams in certain areas could go back to socially distanced training, like we saw in the Bundesliga, for example, 2-3 weeks ago.
Sam McConkey was obviously interviewed yesterday in The Independent, and he was talking about, it was Conor McKeown's piece, he was talking about how certain sports are going to be okay, so running, cycling and golf, singles tennis, for example, but contact sport is miles and miles away. It's a vaccine, it's antibodies, it's PrEP or PEPs, and I think that all makes perfect sense, which would suggest that we're getting further and further away from an announcement until a scientific breakthrough happens, and that scientific breakthrough probably is unlikely to happen in Ireland, so we are at the whim of the rest of the world. The chief executive of Roche Pharmaceuticals yesterday was saying it'll be the end of 2021 before he thinks that there would be a vaccine. He's just one man. Obviously his scientists and his boffins are amongst the best in the world, so you would assume that he's got a fair idea of exactly how long it might take to get a vaccine that would be mass produced and available for, sports people and the rest of the general population to be able to get back on the field of play. So I guess at some point there's a scale here where it's the full lockdown and you try and eradicate it from the island, and then there's the mayor of Las Vegas who goes on TV and says, maybe we could be the test area for zero social distancing and see exactly what that's like. And the people of Las Vegas are looking over it are going, you're volunteering us to be a part of a human scientific experiment? That doesn't sound much fun. So somewhere in the midst of the entire lockdown and the let's use human beings as a petri dish, there has to be some way for us to begin to live and ratchet up the risk level. That is unfortunately what we're talking about here, and it can seem a bit callous to talk like that, but that's what's going to come next, and that's what the conversations are going to have to end up. And I don't know if we're allowed to have those conversations. Are we? Like, I saw somebody making the comparison with the road deaths. Like we as a country have decided that there's a fixed number of road deaths that happen every year that allows us to use roads. So, you know, I think it's 160 people die on average on our roads every year, and obviously it'll be a much lower figure this year, hopefully, because of lockdown. But we don't, and these are completely different things. You know, again, it's the moral hazard. It's the moral issue of, like, at what level do you say this number of deaths is going to be somehow acceptable to the general population or the rest of the country to get life back to where it was? And obviously no death is acceptable if something is preventable, but it's a minefield at the moment.
Yeah, and obviously, if you make that comparison, obviously the RSA have always pushed the idea of Project Zero in recent years. That is always their aim. That, as you say, one death is unacceptable, but it is the hazard of the roads existing, and that is going to be a similar situation once some semblance of normality returns. There is going to be a risk regardless, though, isn't there? Like, there is no possible way that any step forward can happen without risk. When it comes to the testing process, when it comes to the vaccine, everything is shrouded in risk. When it comes to easing restrictions, that is a risk. When it comes to, but if that is done okay, and easing of restrictions goes okay for this country, then the next step is, okay, let's get back to middle scale gatherings. Doing that is a risk. If that goes okay, going to large-scale gatherings is also a risk. Everything involves a huge degree of risks, because this is a disease that can affect people's lives and put a huge number of lives at immediate risk. So there is no way around it. Like, every single argument you can make, even scientific arguments you make at this point, has the asterisk beside it. This is a risky process. It's just about deciding which one has the least grave consequences and the least chance of having a grave consequence. Yeah,
already people getting in touch saying, but road deaths aren't contagious, and that wasn't the point I was making. It was like, at some point there's when the R number that they were talking about last week is less than 1, the reinfections, like at some point there will be COVID-19 in the community, probably until, I mean, there might always be COVID-19 in the community, and some people will end up dying from it, like people end up dying from the flu, and people don't get the flu shots. But at some point we need to reopen. Like, and I'm not saying it has to be now, but what is the pathway to get back there, and what's the realistic pathway for sport to play some role in that? And then there's the mental health issue of, like, getting everybody out to get a bit of exercise and congregate, and maybe congregate in numbers that will allow kids to meet their friends again, and for grown-ups to meet their friends again, because all this is kind of important if we're not going to have significant mental health issues down the road as well.
Like, just on your point about, is this an acceptable thing to talk about or not? Nobody is for 1 second suggesting let's pause all other conversations and let's just focus on sport. This is just the thing that is happening on the side here. This is just the notion of what happens if and when the most important thing here, which is the scientific venture to actually get this country back on track. This is all based on the notion that will eventually happen. What then happens? We are being hopeful here. These conversations help us. I'm sure there are people out there who like to think about what normal life might resemble as well. So on a personal level, I think it's totally fine to have these conversations. It's totally fine to imagine them. And even on a practical level, probably doesn't hurt to be thinking about, right, how do we actually proceed in a safe way?
Yeah, and also, like, what level of competitive sport is going to be available to us? What new sports are we going to watch that we, you know, in years to come will never watch again because it was during the time of the coronavirus and we ended up for example, Ray Moylett doing push-ups against the clock last week. There was a bit of peril, there was a bit of jeopardy, there was physical endeavour, there was a time, and there was like a result at the end of it. I'm like, okay, I'll have a bit of this, please. Give me a little bit more of that. So, anybody out there?
Darts, sure.
Anybody out there with any other ideas other than darts? I mean, the Wi-Fi not being good enough, stopping the darts from happening, was like, okay, I mean, if that wasn't Brexit down the pub, then writ large, nothing ever was more dartsy than, could you not send an engineer around? Can you not get a booster signal?
The English Defence League uses Twitter too, so I don't think Wi-Fi is necessarily... I don't think Brexiteers have exclusivity on a lack of Wi-Fi.
0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number if you want to get in touch with us this morning. But forget the coronavirus. Obviously, the single most important thing that's ever happened has been the draft in Tennessee, where this happened last year. Have a look. Oh, it's the GIF. It's the GIF. The GIF that keeps on giving. Is this an important milestone in your life, Owen?
Which now, 1 year on, or the actual thing?
The actual thing that happened.
No, no. Of course, it's not. Of course, it's not an important milestone. It's something that I will never be allowed to forget ever again in my entire life. Of course, it is. So I think there's probably a slight difference between those two things. And yeah, sorry. I suppose I didn't really remember much about it at the time. But ironically, it's something that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life.
That was the gift there. We have the video of this whole thing. If anybody doesn't know what we're talking about, Owen is in Tennessee. The draft is in Tennessee. It's late in the morning. What part of the town is it?
Broadway.
Broadway. It's kind of like the New Orleans Bourbon Street. It's Temple Bar. It's where people go to drink and have a good time and carouse. And that's exactly what you were doing when a TV camera found you. Have a look.
It's the perfect place for a draft. 150,000 people here tonight. 150,000 people. What an amazing town. The perfect environment for a draft. It was in New York for what, 2 million years? And now they finally came to Nashville.
That's our Uber right there. Would you like to see him stay here?
Yes, of course. This place is the perfect place for the NFL draft. Every pick got a cheer except for Roger Goodell.
Brilliant. That's a thing of beauty. Have you watched
Pretty horrifying.
Have you watched it since recently? Like, because it's brilliant. Properly, like.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. It came up in a Zoom quiz last week, and it's always kind of shown to me, and quite like I guess when I was in Japan last year, people would tweet me as well. Because obviously I interviewed huge Junk fans, and they were like, takes one to know one and all that sort of stuff, which obviously was kind of front page of the joke book at that particular time. So yeah, like it gets sent regularly, to be quite honest. But it's obviously unbelievably cringeworthy to actually watch it back.
But you look so young and healthy and vibrant. I mean, the quality of the footage is sensational. Your eyes are so clear. You look like a young Michael Jordan's clear eyes.
Well, when you're that well hydrated at that point in the night, like how couldn't you look like how could your skin not be glowing at that point? Yeah, like thank you. I guess the question is what happened in the intervening year if I looked that healthy back then. But like I'll take those positives. Thank you for actually spinning this in a much more shinier way than I initially thought.
We are going to talk with Cian Fahey a little bit later on about the actual draft, which happens tonight. And you're going to that one too. Obviously, it's a virtual draft, so it costs us nothing to send you to it. So this will be your second year in a row going to the draft. It's we're really splashing out here at Off the Ball.
Yeah. Absolutely, can't wait. Like it was Kyler Murray who went first last year. I got to see that in the flesh. I presume it's going to be one of those. Whatever happened to him in a few years' time?
He's pretty good. He's pretty good. He's been pretty good.
He's grand. Yeah. It was Nick Bosa was the main pick or the main attraction last year. It's so mad that like people. Well, I guess it's very understandable actually that people just flocked to Nashville, but just this kind of petri dish of all these different types of NFL jerseys in one place was actually kind of amazing. It was like Comic-Con except for football nerds.
Yeah, and there's a lot of those around. 15 minutes past 8 here this morning on Thursday, the 23rd of April. The FAI say they're preparing for all eventualities when it comes to the domestic game. A number of options are being considered in conjunction with the National League Executive Committee, including playing matches behind closed doors and running the League of Ireland season from September until next February. Yesterday, St Pat's announced they were temporarily laying off players and coaching staff. The UK government are not believed to have any objections around the proposed Saudi takeover of Newcastle United. The Premier League are investigating whether Saudi Arabia has any involvement in piracy, which has drawn ire from Qatari broadcast rights holder beIN Sports. Meanwhile, the UK government is believed to want Premier League matches available free to air if they do go behind closed doors. Some of them anyway. Elsewhere, Michael O'Neill has stepped down as the manager of Northern Ireland after 8 years to concentrate on his duties with Stoke City. The former Shamrock Rovers boss couldn't combine club and country, with Nations League matches expected to take place in addition to the rescheduled European Championship playoff against Bosnia. So effectively the same situation as Mick McCarthy, except he has a club job that he's doing at the moment. Watford's players have agreed to pay deferrals up to 30%. The Premier League club, who are 17th in the table when the season was halted due to the pandemic. In tennis, legend Roger Federer has called for a merger of the men's ATP and women's WTA tours. Ulster Rugby's players and coaching staff have been placed on the UK government's job retention scheme, so they've been furloughed, and we'll get to some of them in the back pages of the paper as well. And snooker, July 31st is the rescheduled start date for the World Snooker Championships, which may go behind closed doors in Sheffield if necessary. I figured that maybe they would have been able to do their social distancing around snooker tables before that and get it in behind closed doors and maybe have the biggest TV audience since the heyday of Dennis Taylor up against Steve Davis. Here's what's coming up for you on OTB AM. We're getting into the sports pages in just a minute. The best ever Irish 11 for the Premier League. That's the debate that's coming up. Colin Buig has given us his. It's up on offtheball.com. Relatively controversial in some instances. Ray Houghton not in his team, for example, and Stephen Ireland in his team, which, let's face it, couldn't actually, not true. Stephen Ireland is not in anybody's best ever Premier League 11. I don't care who you're talking about. But anyway, we'll talk about that at around about 8:40. Talking about the NFL draft with Cian Fahey at 9:10. And our player ratings from Better Call Saul. What are we doing next, Owen, after Better Call Saul?
Open to suggestions. We've obviously been floating the idea of doing retrospective Sopranos player ratings, which I'm 100% up for, because this is the time where I will actually follow through on things. I will say, however, that we might just actually clear the decks on some of the newer stuff, because all the next seasons of these shows, such as Better Call Saul, such as Succession, for example, they're all going to be kicked back a few months. So we're going to actually have a gap probably at the end of this year to start of next year, but it's not that much television because of the coronavirus. So while we have the new stuff still rolling out now, we might focus on something like Ozark is what I'm thinking, but open to suggestions.
More people watched Ozark than watched Tiger King, and it wasn't even close, apparently, according to the Nielsen stats.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. It trashed Tiger King, apparently, according to...
just last week, I presume, or...
It was like in terms of it had a much bigger viewership than Tiger King did, even though Tiger King seemed to sweep the entire population. Maybe it's just that little corner of Twitter that we inhabit as well. I don't know if people in the real world are actually watching Tiger King, and I would recommend you don't waste your time with it. That's my relatively tepid take on that. Right, time for the papers.
OTB AM.
So what have we got for you this morning on offtheball.com? COVID-19 complacency could be catastrophic. This is Fiona Steed, who is, of course, an Ireland international rugby player and now working in healthcare, was on last night with Joe talking about this. This is all part of our Formal Friday. On Friday, we're going to be raising funds for frontline workers by dolling up and asking you to do the same and send us pictures. And so she was on last night. Really interesting piece. If you get a chance to go back and listen to it. And I think that this kind of follows on from the conversation that we were having about everybody going out and about and not really observing social distancing the way they were a couple of weeks ago and beginning to take some risks. And here's somebody at the front line telling us that complacency could be catastrophic, so worth listening to. In football, Ben Thornley was on last night's football show, one of the class of 92 who didn't make it. Beckham emulated Cantona, was his take on that. The 32 Mount Rushmore is Donegal's greatest sports people. That is up for debate on tomorrow's show, and a massive debate / argument / fight has broken out about who is the best Donegal goalkeeper between Paddy Bonner and Shay Given. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that.
Well, it's a philosophical question about what actually makes the Mount Rushmore. Is it the actual talents of the human being, the best sports people, or the most important? And that kind of comes with a level of fame. And really, there's only one winner when it comes to the better goalkeeper, and only one winner when it comes to the level of being an iconic goalkeeper. So I think Paddy Bonner is more of a Mount Rushmore mould than Shay Given is, despite the fact that Given was clearly the better goalkeeper.
All right, that is an interesting take. Sport will not be a priority in our society, says the French sports minister. And look, I don't think anybody's arguing that it should be a priority. Obviously, I think this is this kind of weird misunderstanding that sport is this thing which doesn't influence the rest of life. Like, I remember Alistair Campbell coming into studio one time and saying, from their perspective, it was very simple. Sport was an economic policy, it was an education policy, it was a health policy, it was a social policy. and that it wasn't this one thing that sat alone in a single department of sport, that the whole point was that you implicate it in the rest of society, and as a result of that, it can have a meaningful impact. So it's not that it's not a priority, it's just that it's not a thing on its own, that within health, within public health information, you're using sport as a way of keeping people healthy, getting them active, teaching them things when they are active, teaching them how to have better diet, teaching them ideas about mental health, and that sport is a vehicle for that as opposed to something that is not a priority. Because if public health is a priority, then getting people being active, which is essentially the definition of sport, is actually a priority.
Exactly. And also on a level that is as important as that, and Jill Downey mentioned this the other morning, is that, 35,000 people employed in sport in Ireland? Like, there are jobs here as well. And that is the livelihoods of human beings in this country as well. Of course, when we're talking about it, we are speaking from a very selfish position of it'll be great to watch a bit of sport and how great that would be for all of our mental health and all of that as well. But there is another level to that too, and that is the actual livelihoods of people. So it's something that I perhaps had kind of glossed over myself until Jill mentioned it on the show the other day.
Okay, what's up in the Irish Indo for us this morning?
The Irish Independent this morning is leading with Dan MacDonald's story that League of Ireland clubs told to weigh up cost of playing behind closed doors. So the FAI have told the League of Ireland clubs to calculate how much money they would lose from closed doors football before dismissing the idea completely. And also Ulster trio reminded to respect protocols after park exercise. This is Marty Moore and David and Alan O'Connor, pictured at Greenville Park in Belfast yesterday. They've been forced to remind their players, the club, to adhere to social distancing measures after three of the province's stars were pictured appearing to exercise in close proximity in the same Belfast park. Neil Francis says anti-doping system in Ireland is putting others to shame, which is an interesting take on that. And top 50 League of Ireland players since 2000, writes Dan MacDonald. He's revealing the penultimate 10 that make the cut today. And also Gary O'Donovan's been doing the rounds. He's determined to join brother in Tokyo, writes Sean McGoldrick.
The three lads from Ulster, like, there's a possibility they are actually flatmates, right? And have been there together the whole time. I mean, I didn't see that anywhere, but there is and they were also observing social distancing. So unless they're throwing the rugby ball to each other, are we saying that they can't do what everybody else is allowed to do?
No, I don't know if they're living together as a thing. I'm
but even
not
if
sure,
they weren't, like if there are social distancing, are they not allowed to do that? No,
Well, technically at the moment they're not, but you'd imagine that in a very, very short amount of time that is something we can do. Like this is the sort of thing that you would imagine will be the first thing that will be allowed. Like young people, young healthy people, keeping their relative social distance by throwing a ball around the park. Like that is the thing that's come. Like I know that's in Belfast, but come the May the 6th here in the at least south of Ireland, it's going to be a case where that will be allowed. You'd assume. Like surely that's something that will be one of the first things you could do. That those safe, socially distanced events. That after a period of time where we've been doing this for a month and a half, we almost have the wherewithal to know the risks. That we know that people who are living with their grandmother, for example, don't go and meet them. Don't but if you happen to be a teammate of somebody who is living on their own in Belfast, for example, who is a young, healthy athlete, then actually spending time with them may be the first thing you're able to do.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I guess it would be about people actually doing what they're supposed to do. I mean, I've definitely seen kickabouts in various parks where there's been 10 or 11 people. I'm like, I suspect they probably aren't. That would have been, unusual scenario for 11 multiple births of people who don't look like each other to all live in the same house. Sports Thursday in the Irish Times, St. Pat's layoffs underline lack of certainty. FAI have put forward a number of options to complete league season to the clubs. And then Saudi and Qatar proxy war spills into the Premier League. BN Media Group is seeking to block Saudi Arabia takeover of Newcastle over piracy issues, and the Premier League seem to be investigating that as it stands. Premier League clubs discussing ending season. So, and this is kind of a continuous debate that's been raging between various newspapers saying that they weren't talking about ending the season and they are talking about ending the season. That they put off the notion of ending the season. Clubs were told last week play would resume only once there was sufficient capacity to test players, staff and other individuals like the broadcast teams and involved in any behind closed doors competition. And there's also been a provisional medical plan drawn up between the league and a range of club doctors over how to minimise the risk of infection. So there had been no attempt to ascertain a preferred outcome and none expressed by individual teams about whether or not the season will finish. I had kind of thought that they had decided a couple of weeks ago that they were definitely going to finish the season no matter what. If it takes like 18 months to finish that season, they're going to finish that season. But I guess it's pretty difficult, because if you think about it, I was just thinking this morning, if you are, say, Liverpool and you're fairly sure that you're going to win the league and you want to sign a player from another team in the Premier League who is struggling against relegation, for argument's sake, say it's Jack Grealish, you do a deal now to buy Grealish and you loan Villa, Sadio Mane and Bobby Firmino for 6 weeks, for the last 6 weeks of the season, because it happens after June, and all those players are under contract, and Villa stay up because Sané and Firmino score all the goals, Liverpool win the league, and the backdoor deal is done. Like, it's obviously ludicrous, but skullduggery is an opportunity here for teams who either want to qualify for Europe, who want to, like, the contractual situation because of the end of the season, or like the end of the year. That's all going to have to be teased out, isn't it?
Like, that's definitely something that FIFA have mentioned as well. They may need to come up with new regulations, or a regulation to actually say anybody who's contracted till 30th of June has to be kicked back until whatever, at the end of August, end of September, or just have a loophole on it saying the domestic league in which you have started, you must now finish, or you're at least very much obliged to do so. And the summer transfer window will obviously become a very different thing, won't it? Like, there's no way that is ending at the end of August at this point. It's going to be a mid-winter transfer window at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to bet on it, you would say the likelihood of there being football before something major happens in terms of a scientific breakthrough is very limited, and that's backed up by that story in the Irish Times. Medical experts cast doubt on safety of collective training. Gavin Cumsky has he's here talking about a piece in The Lancet. Increased risk of COVID-19 transmission during training is more likely in certain athletic settings where athletes train in groups, engage in contact sports, do not adhere to universal guidelines for social distancing, make use of shared equipment, do not practice universal guidelines and maintain personal hygiene, and use common facilities such as changing rooms, which is essentially every single form of organised training when it comes to sport. So we need some treatment, and we need it fast.
The Irish Examiner this morning, Ger, leads with Jimmy Deanahan saying he can't foresee Gaelic games being played in 2020. Kieran Shannon is talking about backyard football and hurling, how there can still be Munster finals and All-Ireland finals this summer. At its root, at its purest, sport is about play, a kid with a ball, maybe with a sibling or a parent as well, and above all with their dreams and imagination. He says Cork GAA will not lose out on revenue from Westlife Gig. Meanwhile, writes Owen Cormacan, because the fact it's been rescheduled, and they were set to lose out on 750 grand. That's at least that's how much they expected to pocket from the gig. So initially scheduled for August 29th and Saturday, the day after, there were fears the two shows be cancelled rather than postponed, but that's not going to be the case now, it seems. And City would not last too long playing behind closed doors, writes Liam Mackey. That is in relation to Cork City.
The Irish Star this morning, bring it on. That's Jurgen Klopp saying that they're going to be ready whenever the season resumes. Rory wants fans abuse. Rory McIlroy saying that he actually thinks it would be a good idea for the Ryder Cup to be put back a year rather than play it behind closed doors this year. FAI looking for an update. They want to meet with the Department of Sport officials tomorrow for an update on when the League of Ireland might resume. And the league can go past July. Premier League matches could go into August, a year after the season started. UEFA are desperate to find a plan to get domestic seasons finished. Europe football's governing body, led by Sefrin, held a video call yesterday with the European Club Association to discuss potential timelines, and they hope that all domestic leagues and their respective cups are completed by July 31st. If we were to get anything between now and July 31st in terms of football in Europe, that would be a sensational outcome. Obviously something good would have had to have happened, or else it would be incredibly risky. We haven't talked yet about the Ryder Cup. What do you think? Delay it for a year? I mean, obviously there's precedent for that in the wake of September 11. They delayed it for a year, so entirely possible that this could happen again, or play it behind closed doors and get things back on track as soon as he possibly can.
I think a connection between the fans and the golf is as important in the Ryder Cup as any other competition. And if you had to pick one event to kick back to next year because of the fact that it would have no fans this year, it's the Ryder Cup. And every, I guess, local economy that's associated with any of the majors would probably want theirs to be the one that gets kicked back, particularly the people of Augusta, Georgia, who depend on this 1 week every single year to make, I presume, their biggest wedge of cash for the entire year. I'd say it makes up a huge percentage of what they make every single year. They would probably be the ones who would like to say, well, can we have 2 Masters next year? How come the Ryder Cup gets to have 2 Ryder Cups next year? But as Rory says there, the fans of the Ryder Cup do kind of make it. There is obviously kind of it's almost jarring how important the fans can be in the Ryder Cup and how G'd up the players can actually get. And McIlroy himself is probably the one player who's been wearing his heart on his sleeve more than any other over the last couple of years. You immediately think of his epic singles encounter with Patrick Reed a few years ago. So it'd be great to have fans for the Ryder Cup, and if that means just kicking it back to next year, absolutely. Also, the fact of the matter is that there is no Ryder Cup scheduled for next year, that it would just be postponed. Whereas, as I say, if you were to postpone any of the other majors, it will be 2 majors next year, which as opposed to 2 Ryder Cups. I don't know why I said that.
Did you have a little Simon Harris moment there?
I obviously did, yeah. I forgot that there was. It's not till the year after. I'm getting my 2021s mixed up with my 2022s at this point. That's how long we've been in lockdown. Yeah. What year is it? What, like the whole what day it is trope is so last month. Now I'm at the stage of what year really is it?
You okay, hun?
Basically, thank you. I am okay. The Mirror, the Irish Mirror this morning leads with Jurgen Klopp. Just watch us go. Klopp warns Reds rivals. My team's not the finished article. We're not done yet. PFA sends shock survey to players in lockdown. Meanwhile, how often do you feel depressed or think about self-harming? Barraclough favourite to replace Mike. So this is the former Sligo boss, Ian Barraclough, favourite to get the Northern Ireland job. And this sort of story here, which I'd have my doubts about, Prem may be screened on free telly. So UK Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden said productive talks were taking place with governing bodies from across sport and restarting following the coronavirus shutdown. He's also said that there is a possibility that the Premier League could be played without a paywall in front of it on television. And I don't know about that, because it's the whole point of the rush to get things played, not the fact that they will miss out on a huge section of television money.
Yeah, I'm sure some games could be put free. Remember, that was part of the plan. They would show it on YouTube or terrestrial TV, and that this would help keep everybody at home. I think there's definitely a lot of groping around in the dark to try and find some way for this to work. So you would hope that things will move relatively quickly when they do make a decision. The Irish Sun, get your arse home. Pepe and Laka, latest stars to flout lockdown rules. Do they use the word arse in England the way we do? Do they? Is this an Irish headline? Yeah. Or is this the back page headline of the English?
No, they do. They do. They definitely
do. 4 Arsenal stars have become the latest Premier League COVIDiots to break the UK government's lockdown rules. It's, who is it? Xhaka, Louise, Lacazette and Pepe. And then keen to get role as gaffer. That's Robbie Keane wants to go into management. Did an interview with Sky Sports yesterday, and the League of Ireland, obviously, that's Gary Owens. Talking about their decision and what they need to do next. And the Premier League chiefs have committed to completing the season by the end of July. Is the back page story on that one. That is your Sun this morning.
The Irish Daily Mail leads with Jurgen Klopp's quotes. Klopp pledge is the headline. We'll get even better, vows Liverpool boss. O'Donovan driven by dream of Olympic gold. That's Gary O'Donovan speaking yesterday. Clive Woodward's 10-point plan to revitalise rugby, and he's backing Pichot to be at the helm.
The London Times obviously have been at the forefront of this beIN Sports story and how they're trying to stop the Saudi Arabian investment in Newcastle. Saudi piracy investigated by League. And that is a picture of Neymar staying cool in the crisis. Showers outside the mansion where he's based near Rio. So obviously, you know, I'd say if you live on his compound, you're having a good time. Neville to walk away next year. That's Phil Neville stepping down as the England women's football manager. And rugby is too old and white. This is Augustin Pichot, who, he's right. It's just that it's going to be a lot of old white men who are voting on the actual elections in the end. So, do turkeys vote for Christmas? I don't know. It's an interesting election policy, and you wish them all the best with it.
The Guardian this morning leads with an interview with Ada Hegerberg. It's important we don't take 2 steps back again. She says female players must be strong after crisis. Meanwhile, also in women's football, Neville stepping down, England women's manager, to leave role next summer, and season remains in balance as Moyes voices his concern. So David Moyes, the first Premier League manager to really say that he's concerned about the season ever returning. You've also got a story there in Formula One. Ferrari quit threat team will consider F1 future if severe budget caps imposed, and government says Premier League must make tune call. That's the latest on the Newcastle story.
The Telegraph back page this morning there is Saturday deal to go ahead despite backlash. So that's what their expectation is, that there will be new owners of Newcastle. 50 years on, live Saturday afternoon TV football is back. Live Premier League football is set to be televised in Britain on a Saturday afternoon for the first time since the blackout window was introduced more than 50 years ago, as BT hopes to show German Bundesliga matches from next month. The Bundesliga will seek to finalise proposals today for its remaining games to be staged behind closed doors with a 9th of May start date, as part of an attempt to complete the season by the end of June. Bundesliga season was competitive at the top of the table. I'm suddenly going to have to do a lot of Bundesliga reading and be like, well, I mean, we're all Jadon Sancho fans, and that Dortmund team are always good to watch. And at least this is one of those years where Bayern Munich had the good grace not to be 40 points clear. So, and then Murray, I feared I might have COVID-19, so I went into isolation. Andy Murray, responsible, and felt that he might have had symptoms, but hasn't been tested, and says it's quite difficult. Even the multi-millionaire Andy Murray couldn't get a test. It's quite difficult to know whether you have actually had the virus or not. So we're miles and miles away from everybody being tested who needs to be tested. Last one from you for now.
By the way, 6 points separating the top 4 in the Bundesliga, so it's a great league to get back if it does actually get back first. The Irish News is what I've got lastly here. Teenage recruitment should stop, says the party Northern Ireland boss, Michael O'Neill. He says, I think that younger players who are still trying to make their way in the game should not be put in that position, sort of alluding to the tug of war between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland for players. But he does say here it's not even about the FAI. Ultimately, UEFA and FIFA shouldn't allow it either. It's a shame for a player to be lost to international football. And we have seen some young players who have unfortunately experienced that. So Michael O'Neill, he's always had stuff to say about that. Always felt a little bit uneasy about the tug of war that exists between youngsters. And Hampsey's train stalled in lockdown. This is Pádraig Hampsey, whose business is as a personal trainer. Obviously, he's been affected hugely by the events of the last 2 months.
I thought from the headline that he actually had like a locomotive that he couldn't get out of somewhere because of lockdown. I was like, wow, that guy has his own train. How amazing is that?
That really would be astonishing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It does say continued on page 39 here at the bottom of it. So I will admit I haven't read the page 39 exclusive on Hampsey's steam train.